It's Porsche's turn to throw their hat into the ring, and I've got the inside scoop to share with you. Now, Ferrari have entered the arena with the new F80, following on from LaFerrari, and McLaren have taken the wraps off the P1 successor with W1. So will Porsche bring something to replace the 918 Spyder? They presented the Mission X concept, but is it going to be built? Or has that project been canned? Today, I'm at Magden Motors in Maryland to drive this incredible Porsche 918 Spyder, one of the original Holy Trinity. Car fans around the world are beyond excited for round two, but where are Porsche? Hi guys, I'm Shmi. Hello and welcome back to the channel. From 918 Spyder to the Mission X. Is that next? Let me share some news with you that you've never heard before. What a time it is right now. We're spoilt with some incredible cars being introduced at the moment. We've seen McLaren and Ferrari launching their new models, but is it time for Porsche to do the same? Everyone is expecting a new Holy Trinity. Now, working in this industry, I'm privy to a lot of insider information, some of which I'd like to share today, but to understand if we're about to have a new Holy Trinity, let's quickly remind of the original, the Porsche 918 Spyder that launched at about the same time as the McLaren P1 that also launched around the same time as Ferrari's LaFerrari. This trio of hybrid hypercars that introduced hybrid technology, cars that were approximately equal in price point and offered about the same amount of performance, around 900 horsepower, all creating this incredible, I'm going to say once in a lifetime battle. Now, I've been to many different events where there have been the trio of these different cars lined up beside one another. There are numerous collections around the world that house all three of these cars. It became a very desirable thing for people to bring together, all very exclusive, absolute flagships of technology from their respective manufacturers, but doing it in quite a similar way when it comes to what was available at the time. In fact, then you had hypercars on the market like the Bugatti Veyron, the Koenigsegg Agera, the Pagani Huayra, both of the latter two in their original forms. And these three came along offering immense levels of tech and performance and created a battle unlike any other. Now, I always said that the Porsche, the 918, was more of your daily hypercar. It's very easy to live with, very easy to use, roof panels that you can take off. The McLaren was more at home on the racetrack, down in its race mode with the wing extended and an absolute flamethrower out of the back, whereas the Ferrari was a sonorous sound, the V12 screaming away in a stunningly elegant follow-up to its predecessors in Ferrari's Big Five at that point. But each of these were pretty similar relative to the cars that we have now, and it's created this expectation that we're now entering a new chapter that's the same, a new Holy Trinity. We've got the F80, we've got the W1, a Porsche following it up. That's the question we all want to know. At the Magden Motors private collection, you've probably noticed there are quite a few nice Porsches around, and I want to talk about Porsche Supercars, and particularly legendary 911s, right? Things like the 992 GT3 RS that's right behind me. There are some curveballs about the next models as well to come in a moment, but when it comes to Porsche's history, they've built some amazing cars over the years. Whether it's different 911 iterations that have come out of the GT team in Weissach, or whether it's the Supercars, of which the 918 was the latest. Those really began back with the 2.7 RS, a lightweight 911, absolutely phenomenal driving experience and very much ahead of its time. After that came the 959, again, benchmark in performance, capable of 200 miles an hour. In the late 90s, to homologate the 911 GT1 race car, the GT1's sister Strassen version was introduced, limited to somewhere in the 20s region of cars, and I got to drive one at the Porsche Museum. What a fascinating thing that was actually to bring to the channel. Then, of course, the Carrera GT, one of my favorite cars that Porsche have ever made. In fact, one of my favorite cars in the world, full stop, with its Le Mans-derived V10 engine, roof-off, manual gearbox, absolutely phenomenal sound, and a delight to get behind the wheel of. Before, of course, the 918 Spyder, the new chapter, this hybrid technology introduced into an all-wheel drive, immensely capable, Nürburgring Nordschleife lap record-setting car. But what comes next? it's the Mission X perhaps, maybe it's the 919 Street, and there's a lot more to dive into when it comes to this. Will it be fully electric? Will it have a 4-cylinder? What could it possibly be? What's going to follow up from this history that Porsche have of these amazing cars going forwards? So what exactly is Mission X? This concept that Porsche introduced in 2023 to celebrate 75 years of the company. They were founded back in 1948 with the launch of the 356, but Mission X is very much about the next generation from where we are today. A fully electric hypercar using technology from their commercial tie-up with Rimac, who of course have the Nevera and the different products that have been launched from that. Very much a flagship for what's happening across the range, the whole portfolio. But as a car, Mission X, a concept, very much a feeler for what's coming. The idea being to have 4 electric motors, somewhere north of 2,000 horsepower, a stunning looking car that's actually quite short as well, at only 4.5 meters long, but very much bringing that Rimac technology into Porsche and putting the car out there as a feeler to gauge customer interest, to find out whether this could be something where the appetite would make it go into production. That's what I want to talk about a little bit later on as well. There's no denying that Mission X looks amazing. It would be a very suitable follow-up to the 918 Spyder, but has it worked? If not that, then what about the 919 Street? A concept that Porsche showed back in 2017. At that point, they had recently returned to taking part in the 24 Hours of Le Mans with the 919 Hybrid. Having not won for quite a few years, they bounced back to win again 3 times on the trot before also making an out-and-out monster race car that has decimated lap times around the world, including the Nürburgring Nordschleife. But of course, sitting alongside it, they debuted the idea of making a road car sibling, the 919 Street, borrowing the race car's powertrain, which is actually a hybridized 2-litre turbocharged V4. So bringing that to a road car, but of course, again, a concept to gauge interest from customers, to figure out if this is the path to go down. But where the previous generation has a naturally aspirated V8 supported by 3 electric motors, these new cars that we're talking about are either fully electric or with a 4-cylinder. Which brings us to the topic of emotion and what buyers want when they buy a hypercar. To expand on that, we are here at the Magden Motors showroom, the dealership side of things, to look around at some of the cars before we check out the collection side as well. But we've got the likes of the Ford GT, and this is a carbon series with the exposed carbon stripe and the contrast accent on it. And this is sitting back to back with a McLaren Senna. Very much memories of the Schmiemobiles with those two together. Over in front of us, plenty of Ferraris and Porsches, so the F8, 488, 458 trio, then a very unusual 992 GT3 in linden green with the silver bumper insert. We've got some more 911s opposite. We've got the Corvette, the Huracan STO, the M4 convertible, a pair of Z8s. In fact, over here, the E90 M3 back to back with the DB11. There are plenty of things to come around and just touch on. That's the kind of topic we're talking about today, but we'll skip over it for now. Viper underneath, some Range Rovers DBXs. We've got a pair of SLSs with their fantastic 6.2-litre V8s. We've got the AMG GT Black Series as well, sitting next to the Audi R8 Spyder right here. But of course, these are cars that are about emotion, about the motors, about the internal combustion engines. Even if it's something like the DBX 707, these pair that we have right here, that's what it's all about. And in fact, when it comes to engines, the Ford GT is an interesting case study because, of course, this has a 3.5-litre twin turbocharged V6. And out of all of my Schmiemobiles, the Ford GT is literally my favourite. Now, at the time, Ford couldn't put their V8 in because they wanted to go racing with it, and that engine wouldn't have been competitive. So the advantage of using the smaller EcoBoost is that it could very much race. It went to Le Mans, it was successful, it won. So personally, I quite like the V6 engine. I think mine sounds absolutely fantastic. And these are some very nice examples of the cars right here. The Senna, obviously a derivative of McLaren's V8. They've used their 3.8-litre engines and the 4-litre engines and the new one that's in the W1 as well. But this was very extreme at the time. The likes of this, Valkyrie AMG 1, completely different to the Holy Trinity that had come before it. I want to show you for a moment around the collection here at Magden Motorcars because there's something that every single car here has in common, whether it's the Rezvani Hercules 6x6 or the Lexus LFA, which is one of my absolute dream lottery win cars. I have enjoyed every single experience I've ever had with one of these. Even the 2 Diablos right here and the one beneath is actually the rare Momo edition. We've got the original Widowmaker, the GT2 RS of the 997 generation, sitting beneath an SLR. I love the spec of this Spyder RS sitting next to a Defender. We've got a few lovely Porsches. We've got the Corvette, the Maserati, the Z8, a Z1 right here with doors that tuck down into the sill. Behind that is very pretty pretty. We've got an SL65 AMG Black Series above, a brand new Ferrari 812 Competizione, the matching pair of Heritage Edition Ford GTs, the earlier car and the new one right down below, Speedster, Pista, plenty of other Porsches tucked in, very nice GT4 RS back there, the Daily GTS Targa, the GT3 RS of course, and a 914-6 tucked in at the back. But those and every other car, the CLK Black Series, the 918, you name it, everything in this room has a combustion engine. They are all emotional driving experiences, particularly if it's a V10. The manual of the Diablo, the older Porsches that all offer a very similar feeling in that context. They're about the passion, the connection that you have with the car when you're driving. It's something you'll find through every single car that features in this part of the private collection and over at the showroom, something that is so important and intrinsically linked to the success, the history, the stories, the rear engines of 911s, the special supercars from Porsche, like the 918, the sound of the exhaust from right behind your head that we're going to have as well is a big part of this experience. And that's what I think the next iterations, the next steps need to be so aware of. What if Mission X arrives and it's fully electric? Because this is quite a fascinating topic. We've seen a number of electric hypercars like the Rimac Nevera, the Pininfarina Battista, both of which are amazing cars, incredible performance, but struggling to sell. The Lotus Evija, again, struggling to get through to production, and again, sell a number of them as well. So if Porsche do that, are they the brand that could turn this, that could change this? Now, Mate Rimac himself said that people, buyers of these cars, are looking for the emotional connection. They want internal combustion engines. That's why Tourbillon has a V16, which is a really interesting topic of conversation because brands like these, especially Porsche, based in the European Union, have new rules and regulations that are very much getting in the way of what the gearheads that work at these companies would actually like. Now, Ferrari, of course, introduced F80 with a V6. It's an engine that I love from my 296, and they race in Formula One with a V6, in the World Endurance Championship, like the 24 Hours of Le Mans, with a V6. The 296 GT3 has a V6. The Challenge cars have a V6. It's very much Ferrari in motorsport and bringing that to the road. But after the predecessors to F80, the F50, the Enzo, the LaFerrari, all had V12s, there's been a massive amount of uproar about the new car not having one. And people have said, well, Valkyrie can do it, Gordon Murray Automotive and Zenvo and others can do it, so why can't Ferrari? And this is the regulation topic and what it actually means. The manufacturers who produce a very small number of cars have different rules. When it comes to something like Valkyrie, you might not know this, but you can't actually do it anymore. That period has passed a couple of months ago. If you have a Valkyrie now that's not registered in Europe, the deadline is gone. It's game over. That can't exist anymore. That couldn't happen today. That's finished. Companies like GMA and Pagani, in fact, and Zenvo can do it because they produce less than 1,000 cars a year within the EU. Companies like Ferrari, who produce 1,000 to 10,000 cars, have completely different rules that apply to them. Companies that produce 10,000 to 300,000, like JLR, for example, again, different rules, and above 300,000, different rules again. It's immensely complicated to try and work out, but it means for Porsche, if in the follow-up to the 918 they wanted to develop a new combustion engine, a new V8, to justify that expenditure on the powertrain, they had to be able to use it in different applications, which now they can't. That's why the Porsche lineup is going heavily electric. But it's really interesting to think about this and about these niche and boutique manufacturers that can have V12s in future cars. Now, Dodici Cilindri and Puro Sangue are a little bit of an exception because they are models that already exist in these rules that change literally every single year, and they are developments of what came before, which is, again, a different part of this. It's very complicated to understand. I'm going to keep that brief. In a moment, we are taking this out, a cold start of the V8 and a drive in the 918, thanks to the Magden Motors private collection. But before we do, a quick introduction to this car. It's a beautiful example out of the 918 cars. And interestingly, on our platform, Exclusive Car Registry, we have 100% completion of all 918 cars. You can see the different events they've been to, the different specifications, some of the PTS colors that are out there. It's a fascinating resource when it comes to these kinds of things. But the 918 was, of course, this 1/3 third of the accidental Holy Trinity from back at the time, launched at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 2013, having had a number of concepts that had arrived before. In fact, even the first that was shown at the Geneva Motor Show way back in 2010. But the technology setup is very much around the V8. You've got a 4.6-litre naturally aspirated V8, mid-rear mounted, linked to an electric motor at the back and two further electric motors up at the front for a total of 887 metric horsepower. That's 875 brake horsepower and 1,280 newton meters of torque. All of that means you've got this electric four-wheel drive system effectively, 19 kilometers of electric range, so about 12 miles, and an ability to have a ridiculous launch off the line. All meanwhile, the exhaust tailpipes sit right behind your ears, about 2 foot behind. It's very loud from inside the cabin. You feel very connected to it. You've got the carbon fiber monocoque, you've got carbon fiber body panels, you've got a completely new look interior that was designed exclusively for the car with the dashboard and that floating central console. You've got these bucket seats, the 918 seats as they were called, that have gone on to feature in just about every Porsche model that's come out since, all of the different GT products. You can take off the two Targa roof panels. These can be stowed away like the Carrera GT under the front clam. It's very much in keeping with Porsche's design, a beautiful looking car, I think it has to be said. And in fact, a decade on, doesn't this still look good? Things like the headlights have found their way through the rest of the portfolio and the family range since. The Hypercar is always about that, developing new technology, the active aero of the wing at the rear, and incorporating it then into the model lineup going forwards. So let's get this started, get it outside, and have a quick run in this beautiful 918, which, by the way, is in liquid silver. At the time, this paint colour was something like a €60,000 option, about 10% of the buy price of the car for this multi-layer, deep silver pearlescent paint. It is beautiful, but let's come round and get this out and go try it out. I'm not gonna lie, if this car came out today, it would still be seriously impressive. It's just very easy and welcoming to drive. Now, I'm in sport mode. You have a number of different modes: e-drive, hybrid, sport, race, or press the red button and you get hot lap. We've got the 7-speed PDK, one press here pops it into manual. Start to drop down the gears though, and the sound of that V8 right behind me in the rear deck is utterly insane. This guy, in his massive pickup, is clearly out for a race with the 918, but nonetheless, inside here, I tell you what, it's just welcoming and you feel right at home. It's an easy car to drive. It's not like scary as so many of the modern things like the Valkyrie and that kind of stuff actually are, and you can just swap it back. So if you want to drive in electric, you put it into e-power, it will run the engine for a little bit longer, just until I think it's comfortable to drop it into full electric. But then you have e-drive, which, to be honest, with my cars like the SF90 and the 296, I do actually find that I use more than you might think for arriving at home, for just maneuvering. Sometimes you don't want to just start the engine for a few seconds. It's kind of pointless. But everything in here, very Porsche. Prominent round dials, physical dials, even though you have the screens basically in the back of them. And a seating position, there we go, it's gone into e-power now. It's still strange. It's over a decade old and it's still strange. This tech was really brought in a very clever way into this car, and I think that's what these flagship cars are supposed to be. They're supposed to give you a sense of what's coming next, right? To be at the pioneering level of technology, of concepts, of ideas, of testing things, because these are emotional purchases. These aren't cars or things that you say from your head, oh, I need that to daily drive or to commute. Nobody's driving a 7-figure car on a daily, but not many people are driving 7-figure cars on a daily basis. Go the other way though, let's pop it all the way up into race mode. The engine starts very smoothly behind you. Drop down some gears, and that's where, when you put your foot down, the sound of that exhaust system right behind my head is phenomenal. Such a cool car. And you have to remember, when this tech arrived, at that point, hybrids were like Priuses. That was kind of it. Not all that many other cars had this plug-in hybrid type of technology. It's something that we've really grown more to since then. For the SF90, Ferrari definitely looked at this and said, right, here's the idea, even in terms of the settings for the drive powertrain modes and what Ferrari have on the E-Manatino. They kind of match up one for one, basically, up to qualifying mode. In here, that sound, that's the thing. That sound is what these kinds of cars need. It's a beautiful day, but I tell you what, that sun sure is low, and I apologise if that's slightly annoying in the background, but not all that much I can do about it. Oh, it's mega. Driving a 918 again. It's definitely the right day and the right place to be driving. Nice twisty roads out here, through the foliage at this time of year, as everything turns very orange and red all around us. But it's the pinpoint sharpness of this. I love the steering feel of it. I love the whole feel of the car, even though it's quite heavy, relatively speaking, because of the battery tech, right, and the electric motors. It doesn't really feel it. Some of the modern cars are really having to work very hard to disguise that, because this has all changed very quickly. But it's about, when it comes to a flagship car, being the head of what's possible, the top of the game at that time. And that's where the CGT and the 911 GT1 and the 959 and even the 2.7 RS have all been. That's what they've all been about. So if Porsche are going to re-enter this game, what is that right now? Is that a full electric hypercar? Is that the direction it has to go in? Is that making another engine that ultimately has a limited lifespan and can't even be registered in Europe anymore? Is this, like is the case with the 911 GT3s, GT3 RS, and GT2 RSs, quickly becoming a problem when it comes to engines and what they can offer? And I actually want to talk a bit more about that. It's a very, very, very difficult game right now. But this, I got a big smile on my face. Every time I've driven a 918 ever, and I've been very spoiled to drive it, or these on a number of occasions, I've got out really, really, really enjoying it, because you genuinely could drive this all the time. You really and truly could. This is the hypercar, if you're ever going to do that with a hypercar, that could pull it off. And even the term hypercar only really came into action with the Holy Trinity. Before that, the previous era, Enzo, SLR, Carrera GT, they were supercars. The Veyron was arguably the first hypercar, but it was alone in the segment, so the segment didn't really get a name. It was the Veyron. The Veyron was the king of them all. I like the burbles, I like the sounds. This is factory stock, a car with full acid green delete. Just the liquid silver paintwork and the silver details to match, and it's a really, really, really good thing. Now that we're back at the private collection, I want to share something with you about 911s, which might be a bit of a revelation. We've just had the introduction of the new 992.2 GT3. Loads of good things about it. The update to the .1, there'll maybe be a facelift to the RS as well in the future, but there's something about it that hasn't really been widely reported on. So the good stuff, there's the winged car and the touring at the same time. There's a new Visac package. There are the optional rear seats that you can now add in, which previously could only be done with aftermarket. There's a folding bucket, a new design, lots of good positive things to say. But also, it's not really been mentioned, it's slower than the .1. And the reason for that is that the flat six, the naturally aspirated 4-litre engine, is still making the same horsepower, 510 metric, 503 brake horsepower, but torque is down from 470 newton meters to 450. What that means is a slower top speed by a few miles an hour, basically slightly less oomph from it, and overall, it's a slower car. Not because Porsche want it to be, but because of the regulations. In the EU, these are constantly being updated, and this engine is basically being strangled. So what does that mean for a new RS? Will it come? What about the GT2 RS? And an interesting story for you. About 3 years ago at the Nürburgring, I saw a car that looked like this, before this had been introduced, with the big wing at the back, with the aero over the front, in full black with no badges. But I heard it drive past, and there was a very distinctive turbo whistle, something you might think would be linked to a GT2 RS. The thing is, it's been 3 more years, and the murmurs I've heard from inside are that that car will never happen, because it's being strangled, because you can't do it. So what does that mean then at the hypercar end of the spectrum? We've seen what's happened from the Ferrari side, the V12 becoming a V6, and what people think of that. What would people think of the successor to this being the fully electric Mission X? Looks amazing, but fully electric? We've seen how other brands have struggled with that. Is the Porsche brand even strong enough for it? Well, let me tell you this. Porsche put that concept out there to gauge customer interest, to see if people wanted to buy Mission X as the follow-up to the 918. They only got about 1/3 of the demand they hoped for, and as a result, I believe it's not happening. I believe that car is not going to be part of a next generation Holy Trinity. And if the Porsche badge isn't strong enough to sell a fully electric hypercar, what does that mean? Is it ever going to happen at this segment of the industry from a major manufacturer? This is a really fascinating topic. It's clearly not a repeat of what happened 10 years ago. These three cars that, like this, are very much at home on the road, but have this immense dynamic capability. They are so different to things like Valkyrie and AMG 1. But if it's not Ferrari versus McLaren versus Porsche, what is it? Is it Tourbillon, T50, Utopia, Aurora, CC850, Gemera? There are some amazing cars. But what is the head-to-head these days? Is it completely irrelevant? These larger manufacturers, like Porsche, are probably going to struggle with this. It's probably not going to happen again in the same way that it could 10 years ago. A big thanks to Magden Motors for the drive today in the 918 Spyder. A big thanks to you guys for watching. And if you like videos like this, check out the one right over there. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about the next generation of hypercars. But that's it for now, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.